Walter's mother, May, is seen driving Walter to a dilapidated rural farm where his two great uncles reside. May lives an unstable lifestyle and has little faith in her family. Walter, on the other hand, is a shy, reserved, and untrusting boy. He's never met these uncles before, and the thought of separating from his mom leaves him with feelings of uncertainty. Walter feels it would be weird living with these uncles he's only just hearing about, and offers to go with his mom instead. But May tells him she would be too busy working her tail off learning court reporting, so he should be considerate. May believes that with a chance of setting Walter up with his uncle, he could uncover the mystery of their hidden fortune, and she could finally live the life she's always dreamt of. While they ride to the house, May tells Walter of the rumors of his two uncles disappearing for 40 years and suddenly appearing with millions stashed away in cash, hidden somewhere in the house. She needs him to get close enough to them to find out where they hid the money, or get his uncles to be fond of him so they could leave a will of their fortune to him.
There he is.
Two men are seen fishing in a lake, firing rounds from their guns at a fish, but they don't seem to hit their target. May finds them and calls out to them. May planned to make it a surprise visit, but the two men seem undisturbed by that. She introduces herself as their niece and Walter as her son. They frown at the realization. She takes a moment to convince them to keep her little boy while she's away. They think he's whiny and would have to handle things all by himself. She bids him goodbye as she reminds him of his purpose there. Walter sits on the balcony later on with his two uncles but secludes himself by the side. He asks if they've got a telephone, but they don't have one. He proceeds to talk about a television, but they don't have one either. Walter begins to wonder about the days of boredom that lay ahead for him. Just then, something interesting happens. Different gentlemen would drive to the front porch to interest his uncles, Garth and Hub, with their business wares and offers. With the rumors of their great fortune being a big attraction, every business merchant would make a stop at the house. With each fellow that walks out of his car comes a worthy amount of gunshots, sending the men flying and fleeing the premises. That was about a day's activity for them. Walter is shown his room, and from the doorpost, it looks like he was ready to be haunted by ghosts through the night. He gets through his fear and walks in, knowing he's on his own from that moment henceforth. The bed is like a mountain of dust. He opens up his case and only has a few items in it, including his toothbrush. He picks up his brush and begins brushing his teeth. Just then, he sees a big box at the side of the room, but it's locked. He assumes it's the mysterious money being kept inside. He mysteriously finds the key, and when he opens the box, he finds only sand looking back at him. His curiosity is piqued as he discovers a picture in this trunk filled with sand. Walter hears footsteps, which prompts him to look out the window, only to find his Uncle Hub walking towards the lake. He follows, but discovers the sleepwalking man exchanging spears and swords with an invisible enemy. Walter is soon surrounded by a bunch of dogs and falls asleep while keeping watch over his uncle. The next morning, he questions them about the past 40 years of their disappearance, but his Uncle Hub doesn't want to talk about it. They all go gardening, and a car drives into their yard, announcing the arrival of another set of relatives. Hub walks past them and heads inside, and so does Garth. They are left to question Walter since they know of his mom and her lifestyle with men. They get into a conversation with his uncles and immediately conclude that May was never returning to pick up Walter. Walter walks into this statement and takes off running. He finds a phone booth and places a call to the supposed college his mom had claimed to have had an admission to, but finds out she was never a registered student there. It was all a charade by her to keep him away from her. His hopes of ever reuniting with his mom fade away at that moment. His uncles and a relative go searching for him. They find him sitting all by himself at an isolated building, where he tells them he wants to run off to Montana. Garth tries to convince him otherwise and begs Hub, who seems nonchalant, to join in. They beg him to stay, as that would vex their other relatives into leaving them all alone. Walter agrees to stay for a little while. The next morning, another gentleman comes with a sales offer. Garth and Hub prepare to shoot, but Walter suggests that they check out whatever item the gentleman has to sell. What was the point of having a lot of money if they weren't going to spend it anyway? They agreed and, for the first time, made a purchase for the item as it roused uncomfortable feelings in their relatives. As Walter spends more time with Garth and Hub, he gets increasingly fascinated by their mysterious past. Garth fills him up with tales from their past lives. How their great adventure all began and events that led to them joining the First World War. The two men, now renowned for their wild and unorthodox past, seem to have lived a life filled with secrecy and wanderlust. Walter begins to come out of his shell as he now engages in sporting activities and gardening with his uncles. They grew a variety of vegetables, only to discover they were tricked by a salesman and had planted a field of corn. The men, in a bid to experience wildlife sport, ordered a lion from a passing zoo. As they prepare to shoot, they realize it's too weak, and they feel bad about killing a sick animal. Walter volunteers to make a cage and feed her, and they agree, but only in the light that they get to shoot it when Walter has nursed it back to health. As they go to make purchases for lion food, Hub collapses on the way and is rushed to the hospital immediately. There, Walter asks for more tales from the past. Through a series of flashback sequences, Garth transports Walter to tales from his youth. The tales shed light on past escapades, from confronting a very wealthy sheik, to rescuing a princess, to uncovering hidden treasures while battling alongside each other, escaping from prisons, and battling alongside legendary swordsmen. The stories grew more and more extraordinary with each tale. Hub forcefully checks himself out of the hospital, and they all drive to a restaurant to get some steaks and beers. Suddenly, a group of loud teenagers burst through the front doors and try to harass Hub. Garth only steps aside and advises him not to kill them. Hub teaches each of the four young men some rules in fighting, while also leaving each with broken bones and bleeding noses.
Now, boys.
He drives them to his house after that. Back at the house, the relatives have arrived, and in the absence of the parents, the kids get curious and break the wooden cage housing the lion. They run off upon realization, allowing the lion to run free into the cornfield. Garth and Hub arrive to find that the lion has been set free. This prompts them to go hunting after it.
You got a lion. It's locked up.
No, it isn't. Try to
Walter goes ahead, but isn't heard from in a few moments. This sets them all on edge, and the entire family, including the children and the four teenagers from the restaurant, are seen holding a barrel each, ready to shoot. But they find the lion, Jasmine, only playing with the boy. The two old men are surprised, and the relatives are distraught. They cannot live with men that keep lions as pets, so they leave and vow never to return. The teenagers have a quick meal with the men, and Hub gives them his "what every boy needs to know about being a man" speech. Inspired by the great tales from his uncle's past, Walter starts coming out of his shell. He questions his potential and makes the decision to become just as courageous as his uncles were. The bonds between Walter and his uncles grew stronger by the day, so much so that Walter finally mustered up the courage to ask his uncle Hub about Jasmine, his one true love. Jasmine died due to childbirth, and this made Hub lose the strength to keep on. He begs his uncle to make him a promise to live long enough to see him grow up. Hub agrees after much pleading. One night, after watching Garth, Walter discovers the hideout of the millions of cash he's been hearing about. Coincidentally, his mother drives in that very night and introduces a man, Stan, as a detective to him. They requested to know where the money was stashed. Stan tells Walter that his uncles, Garth and Hub, match the description of two armed robbers from the 20s and 30s who robbed a bank and stole millions of cash. Walter is shocked and disappointed about the news. He doesn't think his uncles were capable of such atrocities. Instead, he is suspicious of his mother and Stan's motive for requesting the cash. Stan wants to have a moment alone with Walter, so he tells May to excuse them. He drags Walter to the barn and hits the boy. Walter gives him a low blow and runs off. Stan catches up to Walter, and while hitting him, Jasmine, the lion, runs into Stan and attacks him. Garth and Hub rush out and try to pull Jasmine off, but find out she's dead. They bury Jasmine the next day, and May comes to pick up Walter with Stan in the car, wrapped up in so many bandages he could hardly move. He carries his case and joins the car after sharing goodbye hugs with his uncles. Garth and Hub admit that Walter wasn't in good hands being left with his mother. While in the moving car, Walter realizes his mom's intention to still marry Stan. Too cross to express himself, he opens the door and jumps right out of the car. May catches up to him and expresses her displeasure. She tells him of her love for Stan, but Walter argues of how she's never been stable in her previous relationships. He warns her of Stan and discerns that he's been hitting May. Walter begs his mom to do one thing for him, for once in her life, she should make a decision that is best for him, since she wasn't sure what was best for her. Amidst tears, May hugs her son Walter. Later that day, Walter is seen running from a distance to meet his uncles. With Walter back, he gives them 3 conditions for him to live with them. They must stick around through his college years, eat healthy, and abstain from any form of dangerous activities. The 2 old men welcome him home, and they head inside. Years later, Walter, now a grown and successful man, receives a call reporting the death of his 2 uncles. He drives to the old house and finds that they died in an aircraft they both flew, which crashed into their barn while landing. A helicopter lands suddenly at that moment, and a young man steps out with a child in tow. They had flown in to see where these men lived after hearing of the incident in the news.
Very wealthy sheik. He used to love to tell me stories about his wild...
Walter is pleased to discover that these were the son and grandson of the great sheik that Garth talked about years ago. The sheik's son mentions how his father considered Garth and Hub as his most honored adversaries. The 2 men exchange pleasantries, knowing that the adventure of Garth and Hub may seem like a fairy tale, but it did happen.